takbir, alay risalat, alay hadari, alay tahqiq, alay ghausiyat, darbar aliya Ghamkol Sharif, ulama ahle sunnah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على أشرف الأنبياء سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد. كلما ذكرك الذاكرون وغفل عن ذكرك الغافلون. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد طب القلوب ودوائها ونور الأبصار وضيائها وعافية الأبدان وشفائها. وبعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا خير خلق الله. Today we have gathered to commemorate the remembrance of one of the friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is called by the title Zinda Pir, and this title was conferred upon him in the year 1938 when he went to see his murshid, his guide in the spiritual path, Al-Hajj Muhammad Qasim Murwi rahimahullah ta'ala, who had surpassed the age of 100 years at that time. He had gone past the age of 100 years. And when he came, he said that Zinda Pir is coming to you. And this title was given to him. This title means the living guide. The guide who is living. Unfortunately, some of those who ascribe themselves to the Najdiyah movement have taken this thing out of context. And within the UK, I must say that Sufi Abdullah Khan Sahib, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, has become the target of jealousy. Many people are jealous of him. They are not only jealous of him because of his success in deen, they are also jealous of him because of his success in dunya. As if to say the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do not have dunya in their hands. Yes, they may have dunya in their hands, but they do not have dunya in their hearts. This is a fact. So, because he has become a target of jealousy, mainly because of the period that passed by before we were even born, before we were even born, these people stood up for the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And the controversies that took place prior to us led this group, especially this branch of Naqshbandi Silsila, this specific branch where we are standing today, to establish this Jami' Masjid, central masjid for Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, where we see today people from all turuq, all quarters of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah congregate here, and the doors are open for everyone. So this has made this masjid in particular a target of jealousy. Why? Because, for instance, that particular Friday speaker who speaks against this masjid, or the sheikh of this masjid, he speaks because, for instance, they are still renting a building. If you go around the corner and you go and look at the Najdi building, they are still renting from a Sikh. But the success which was given to this is not from this country. The success was from the person who we have come to remember today. Now the title of Zinda Pir was taken out of context by many of them, claiming, because they've made false claims against Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah many times. For instance, they said regarding this particular masjid or many of the other masajid of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah that when you enter their masjid, they have a chair which they have placed for Rasulullah alayhi salatu wassalam. This is false propaganda. There is no such chair in this masjid that we have placed for Rasulullah alayhi salatu wassalam. Maybe there are those green plastic chairs that we have, which some of the old men use, and they place them and leave them at the front, and then people come in and they make all sorts of rumors. Secondly, this masjid is one of the only few masajid which is open 24 hours for people to come and worship. من بنى لله مسجدا بنى الله قصرا في الجنة كما رواه الإمام البخاري. Whoever builds for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in masjid, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala builds a palace for him in paradise. And all the reward of those people who are praying in this masjid and all the masajid of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah goes to those people who established those masajid. Zinda Pir rahimahullah ta'ala was born in the year 1912. So according to the Gregorian calendar, 100 years have passed since he was born. And he was a person of Al-Quran wa Sunnah, a person who followed Al-Quran al-Kareem and As-Sunnah Sharifa. The likeness of him is like the former awliya who have passed before him, like Abu al-Abbas al-Mursi rahimahullah ta'ala. Abu al-Abbas al-Mursi rahimahullah ta'ala was the Shaykh of Ibn Ata'illah al-Iskandari. Ibn Ata'illah was the Qadi, the judge in Egypt. And Abu al-Abbas al-Mursi rahimahullah ta'ala could not read and write. Yet he guided the judge of that area. Because many people make a point also when they hear of a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is not learned in the adult sciences, as if to say that such a person cannot be a friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I say, وَيَخْتَصُّ بِرَحْمَتِهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifies with His mercy whom He wills. We have, for instance, the like of Sidi Ahmad al-Harun rahimahullah ta'ala in Syria. Similar to Zinda Pir rahimahullah ta'ala. He was an ummi, unlettered. He did not learn to read and write, yet he was a hajjar, a stonemason by living. And when he went into the mountain, at one time, he, rahimahullah ta'ala, came down with secrets conferred upon him when he attained wilaya, closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is Sidi Ahmad Harun. Then we have Sidi Ali al-Khawas, rahimahullah ta'ala, one of the mashayikh of Al-Imam Abdul Wahab al-Sha'rani, rahimahullah ta'ala. Sidi Ali al-Khawas, rahimahullah ta'ala, did not know how to read and write. Yet his fatawa were compiled by his student Al-Imam Abdul Wahab al-Sha'rani. And you can see the fatawa of Sidi Ali al-Khawas compiled. They are available. Yet he had knowledge which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala conferred upon his close servants, known as ilm ladunni. And ilm ladunni is that knowledge which is conferred upon clean hearts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states regarding Sayyidina Khidr alayhi salam, وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِنْ لَدُنَّ عِلْمًا. We taught him from our own divine presence and knowledge. This knowledge is known and termed as ilm ladunni, knowledge of the divine presence. And this is the knowledge granted to the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. From 1912 to 1938, Zinda Pir rahimahullah ta'ala was from those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states وَيَخْتَصُّ بِرَحْمَتِهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. This is a wilaya khasa, a specific wilaya which is conferred upon people. Throughout that time, he spent his time in remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, staying away from the dunya and keeping his heart clean. Because when the heart is clean, this is when the light is reflected of the heart. Like Imam Abdul Qadir al-Jilani radiallahu anhu states in Shaykh Asrar that if the heart is not clean, the heart is like a mirror. If the mirror is not clean, the light cannot reflect. During this time, he stayed away from people because khalt bin nas, meeting people too much, has its afflictions. There's an affliction for everything. Sidi Ali al-Khawas rahimahullah ta'ala states, affliction of meeting people too many times, the affliction of that is you will have conflict with people. The affliction of knowledge is arrogance. If someone has too much knowledge, he is afflicted sometimes, not all the time, with arrogance. If someone is jahil, he is afflicted with kufr or shirk or bid'ah. And in the same way, if someone has mixed with people too many times, he will have afat, trials of people. During this time, he stayed away from people and involved himself with the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He met during this time many awliya of his age, like Pir Jama'at Ali Shah, Rahmatullah Ta'ala, who goes by the title of La Thani. They would refer to him as La Thani. There is no second for him. But his murshid was written for him as who we know as Qasim Murbi Rahmatullah Ta'ala. This was his murshid who had waited for him for over 100 years. And we have his descendants amongst us today also. So when he went to see him in the year 1938, when he came, and at that time it was in the middle of nowhere, he conferred the title upon him, Zinda Pir. And this is the title that stayed with him, the living guide. Why is he called the living guide? You know, when they misconstrued this title, they said the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah do not believe in death for the awliya. This is not true, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the Quran al-Kareem, Kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut, every soul shall taste death. And we believe this regarding Anbiya alayhi salatu wa salam and awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that every soul shall taste death. Now when they taste death, the definition of death is mufaraqatul ruhi anil jism, the separation of the soul from the body. No one denies this. But what we affirm for them is life in the grave also. Because when they are placed in the grave, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala confers upon them the barzakh life. But the meaning of the title, the living guide, is that he lived. Baba Qasim Murbi rahimahullah ta'ala lived for over 100 years, and then he said, this is the living guide. This is the context of why this title was conferred upon him. When Baba Qasim Murbi rahimahullah ta'ala passed away, before he passed away, he closed the door of his house and he stayed in khalwa from people, seclusion. He did not give khilafah to anyone after this. He did not give successorship to anyone, and he conferred all the secrets to this last youth who came to see him. At the time he was only 26 years old. Only 26 years old. And he refused to even give allegiance to anyone else. But after he passed away, from 1938 to 1949, Zinda Pir rahimahullah ta'ala kept this secret to himself. What was conferred upon himself, he kept it to himself. But from 1949 to 1953, he began to teach people in the army quarters, because he was in the army also. From that period, from 1938 to 1949, he was in the army. And many miracles took place at his hands during that period. But in 1949, he began to give guidance to people, teaching them dhikrullah. Because, let me tell you something about the adhkar. If someone sits down without a guide and recites certain adhkar, it can have an effect upon him, a particular type of effect. Only a guide can guide a student as to how to recite the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when people give bay'ah, firstly, the first wird you have is your salah, your 5 daily prayers. You must stick to your 5 daily prayers. This is your main wird. And then the guide, when he sees that the person has reached a level where his foundation is fine, he confers upon him a wird. Now the word wird is from watering source. When someone says warid is a watering source, because the wird is a source of water for that person. Al-Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala gives the likeness of a rock, that when a drop keeps falling onto the rock, after a while the drop will have an effect on the rock and will cause a groove to be formed within the rock. The wird in the same way has an effect on the heart. Even if the heart is hard as a stone, the wird will have an effect on the heart. And certain practices, like Sayyid Ali al-Khawaz rahimahullah ta'ala states, that what is the effect of khala al-batan, keeping the belly empty? That when the belly is empty, light is formed. So when someone has the belly empty, light is formed in the belly. But when you eat food, the light is diminished. They also ask Sidi Ali al-Khawwas, if a wali has nur on his face, is this a good thing? He says no. It is not a condition that a wali has nur on his face. Nowadays, you have people who have showboating, they place good lighting. and they wear makeup before they go and do their speeches. So the light flashes down and the powder is shown, and then they take pictures and they Photoshop the picture, and then they pass this off as this is our murshid, this is our guide, or this is our scholar who we promote, or they have videos formed like this. But this is not a condition for a wali. A wali does not have to have light reflected on his face. Why? Because this becomes fitna, tribulation for him. Tribulation for him when people begin to have i'tiqad. It does not negate it for those awliya who have this. So, these practices of tasawwuf, a person cannot carry them out without a guide. So, Zinda Pir Rahmatullah Ta'ala continued doing this from 1949 to 1952. In 1952, he went to Al-Hajj. His first Hajj was in 1952. And when he went to Hajj, after Al-Hajj, he went to visit Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which is wajib according to us. This is the fatwa, according to many, that it is wajib after Hajj to go visit Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Others have said sunnah mu'akkada. At Rawdatul Sharifa, he received the indication that he must go to this mountainous region, which is known as Ghamkol. Now, when we name the masjid as Ghamkol, you know, the Najdiya movement have the audacity to come into our masjid, use the facilities, and at the same time make a mockery of the name. This is insulting. This is not the thing people of honor do. If you come to our masajid, you respect the facilities of this masjid. In the year 2004, under the guidance of Sufi Abdullah Khan Sahib, I done khutbah here in Jum'ah for 1 year. Under Sufi Abdullah Khan Sahib's guidance. This was my first khutbah that I delivered here for 1 year. In this 1 year, what I learned from Sufi Sahib is appreciate the services that you have. That's the main lesson. You know, when we would come to the masjid, what I learned is that when you use the masjid facilities, he did not say this to me with his mouth. I learned it by observance, is that at least appreciate that service that you have and look after it also. So for instance, simple things, when we leave the masjid, you switch off the light, because this lighting that we have here is not coming out from our pockets, it's coming out from the masjid. The community gives the money to the masjid, and the money is waqf. These simple things matter, and this is something which we as the new generation must learn. Or for instance, when you come and use the facility of the masjid, appreciate the facility, and if you see anything on the masjid which is a piece of cotton even on the floor, pick it up. These simple things. These are the things which you learn with the men who have spent time with major people like Zinda Pir Rahmatullah Ta'ala. But let me tell you something else. His status can be weighed like this. You know, which sin is worse than zina? Fornication. A worse sin than fornication is riba. Riba eating usually. Which sin is worse than riba? Ghiba, backbiting. And that individual who is backbited on a regular basis attains the rewards of all those people who backbite him. Attains the reward of all those people who backbite him. So the Sufiya, and they have inherited the inheritance of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is harm, which people receive from others, and the awliya also receive harm. Many people backbite Sufi Sahib, and I have many times defended him. Not because I need to defend him, I have a vested interest, no. But at many times I realize that those people who are backbiting him are also doing him a favor by giving him their reward, by giving away their reward. So, this tahammul, Al-Imam Junayd rahimahullah ta'ala said that the Sufi is like the earth, everyone walks on him, on the earth, and walks on the Sufi, yet it does not react. This is the likeness of a Sufi. And the title, when we say Sufi in the UK today, has been associated with Sufi Sahib and no one else. Have you noticed this? Even the Deobandiyya, when I would discuss with them as a young kid, they would say to me, Sufi Sahib. Title is respectful, because we don't dislike the title Sufi. It's a beautiful title. Al-Imam Ahmad Zarruq, rahimahullah ta'ala, states the title Sufi is from Safa Yusafi, which means to become pure. That when a person becomes pure, Sufi. This is from the same root, that the person becomes pure. And harm from people is something which purifies you. So from 1952, he went to the region Ghamkol Sharif. And from that region, which is a mountainous region, he sat there doing dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the world came to him. From those efforts, from sitting in a room or sitting in a cave, his effect from remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came out throughout the world. And this masjid that we are sitting in is his faith, meaning his blessing, from what he attained from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a short synopsis of the life of Zinda Pir rahimahullah ta'ala. Inshallah, the work which is published, Kanzul Irfan. Inshallah, I will task one of my students to do a short biography from that work. And today, I must say that that person who spent many years with Zinda Pir rahimahullah ta'ala, we have in our midst. And we must appreciate these people, because when they are gone, we will suffer from many things. These people that we have in our midst today, take benefit from them. Firstly, they have age. They have experience, more experience than us. This alone we can never buy as young people. The experience that these people have with their grey beards and white beards, do not underestimate this experience. Take from their experience. Sufi Abdullah Khan Sahib has dealt with every type of mulvi. Every type of mulvi. I guarantee you, he looks at me here and he works out what type of person I am. I believe this. When Imam Asim was delivering his lecture, I could tell he looks at him and he knows what type of person he is. And every person sitting here, he knows what type of person he is. Because the hadith in the Sunan of Imam Tirmidhi states, اتقوا فراسة المؤمن فإنه ينظر بنور الله. Fear the foresight of a believer, not any believer, a specific believer, because he looks with the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is in Al-Jami' Tirmidhi. The hadith in Al-Jami' Tirmidhi, and it is a sahih hadith. The narration of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu is found in the tafsir of Al-Imam Al-Qurtubi rahimahullah ta'ala. So, from this experience alone, you cannot buy this with money. Secondly, istiqama, steadfastness. We have not even reached the age of 40. They say, when a man reaches 40, his intellect is complete. So we have not even reached 40, we do not know what we will do in the coming years. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala safeguard our iman and safeguard our tongues. The hadith to protect yourself from fitna, tribulation, is Allahumma Rabban Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, اغفر لي ذنبي وأذهب غيظ قلبي وأجرني من مضلات الفتن ما أحييتني يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. If you recite this regularly, this dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will safeguard you from falling into tribulation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala safeguard us from falling into tribulation. So, istiqama. How many of us can say that we pray our 5 daily prayers in jama'ah, unless you are imam of a masjid? This alone is enough to say regarding a person that he has taqarrub, closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then, having performed ibadah, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for over 80 years. Shaykh Ahmad Habbad rahimahullah ta'ala prayed tahajjud in Al-Jami' Al-Amawi for over 80 years. And he passed away at the age of 108. Shaykh Ahmad Habbad rahimahullah ta'ala. And we would go to see him and gain guidance from him. Yet within this city we have people like this. We have many old men who have reached an age that we as young people must take guidance from them. You have light in front of you and yet you do not take guidance from it. So al-istiqama, being steadfastness, this is something which we can never have. Having increased in age, these people have more reward than us. They have performed more good deeds than us. You tell me this, from the inception of the small masjid, Sufi Abdullah Khan Sahib, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, the many lectures that he has heard from different ulama coming from different countries over the years, that alone you cannot buy with money. The likes of the Sayyid Hashmi Miya Hafidhahullah Ta'ala come here, deliver lectures. Many other Sunni ulama come here and deliver lectures. Listening to all those lectures for many years, you can never buy that with experience. The people he has saw with his own eyes, we have never seen. Many ulama who have passed away, pious ulama of the old generation, the generation of Al-Allama Ata Muhammad bin Diyalwi Rahmatullah Ta'ala, that generation. So he is someone who has saw those people, and they saw those people, and they saw those people, all the way back to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is something you cannot buy with money. These are the simple things. Yesterday we had the challenge to Najdiism, and alhamdulillah, people from all over UK came. After my lecture on hadith and the discussion of hadith, the narrators of hadith, after Salatul Maghrib, the people asked me to give basic nasiha. And I said, the basic nasiha is, let's go back to basics. Let's go back to basics. We as Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah must follow simple people. Our awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those awliya that we follow, was very simple people. I can name many of them, many who have passed away, and some are still living, and in every age there are awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But all of them have something in common. They are very simple people. They all perform the 5 daily prayers in Jama'ah. So this first aspect is that we must follow them in this, that our masajid of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, we must fill with Jama'ah. Pray 5 times a day in congregation. This is something we must fulfill with the remembrance of Zinda Pir Rahmatullah Ta'ala, because he was a person who never left his prayers. Secondly, those simple practices that they had, like dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we must follow them in this. Most of their time was spent in dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We must follow them in this practice also. And the other simple practices of Al-Islam, like staying steadfast on fasting, going Hajj, fulfilling our Hajj, the simple and basic aspects of Islam is something that we must fulfill. Before we go on to advanced things, we must fulfill our basics of this deen, our basics of this religion. And the basics of this religion is our prayer. So this is what we need to go back to. You know, if you stay in the company of these people, this is something you will learn. I traveled in Umrah in the year 2004 with Sufi Sahib. And during that time, he did not leave tahajjud prayer. He did not leave tahajjud prayer during the journey. I witnessed also this with Maulana Muhammad Zaman Rahmatullah Ta'ala, who passed away this year. He was a relative of Maulana Niyaz Ahmed Siddiqui, Maulana Zaman. And when we went to Turkey, he would not leave his tahajjud prayer during our trip. While we were traveling, he would not leave tahajjud. This was something basic that he upheld, and he passed away in a car accident. When I went with Sufi Sahib to Al-Madinatul Munawwara, we sat in the i'tikaf, 10 days i'tikaf in Al-Masjidul Nabawi, and the first thing they noticed about me was that I would sleep. But what I learned from that, because from just the action, was that you should cut down your sleep. This is basic. Cut down your sleep and perform the basics of tahajjud, basics of 5 daily prayers in Jama'ah. These are the basic things that we need to go back to following the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stick to Sharia, a Shari'atul Islamiyah, which is the law. They never break the law. Sticking to the Sharia of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa sallam. This is why you will find them the most staunch people in following the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa sallam. They will be staunch. You will find them with turbans and beards and wearing the garments which are in accordance with the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa sallam. This is something that we need to go back to in following the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and study their biographies. Go and learn. You have Sufi Sahib alive now. His grandchildren have learnt a lot from him. His son has learnt a lot from him regarding his life. Regarding his life, go and ask him regarding his life. Who did he meet? What did he learn from them? What aspects of tasawwuf did he gain from them? What did he learn from Zinda Pir, rahmatullah ta'ala, a man who spent many years with him, you have in your midst, and yet we cannot make benefit from him. This is something very basic. Sometimes, people are only appreciated after they have passed away. Let's not make that mistake with the people we have amongst us. Make use of them now, and do not praise them when they have passed away. Make use of them now. This is something very practical, which I wanted to deliver to everyone here today, regarding going back to basics, learning about the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, making use of the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we have amongst them. Go to them at least for dua. The minimum is go. Everyone knows where Sufi Sahib lives, and when the 5 daily prayers happen, most of the time he comes out, because now he has illness and we must appreciate that he's here amongst us. Go at least for dua. This is the minimum you can do when you meet a pious person who is close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to ask for their dua, their prayer. And inshallah the prayer will have an effect. Instead of always going for ta'weed, go for their dua. Because the dua may have more effect than the ta'weed itself. This is a very simple message. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala safeguard our tongues and safeguard us from falling into fitna, tribulation, safeguard our iman, safeguard our actions, safeguard our hearts, and help us to go back to the way of the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم وأتوب إليه.
ما شاء الله. بارك الله فيك.